Our gospel reading this morning comes from Matthew's gospel. It is a parable that Jesus tells and one that bears good listening. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers to work in his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into the vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I'll pay you whatever is right." So they went. When he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one's hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." Now, when the first came, he did just that. When those who were hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you've made them equal to us who've borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?" So said Jesus, "The last will be first, and the first last." Please pray with me. Might words spoken and words heard and the spaces in between help us to let go of our resentments. Amen. One of the television programs that I really enjoy watching is Chicago Fire. Now, don't judge me. It's a nighttime, primetime soap opera, but I really enjoy it. It's set, as the name implies, in Chicago, and it focuses on the life and work of a group of firefighters. I was pleased to see the other day that the show will begin airing new episodes later this week, which is a bit of a relief for those of us who follow it. For you see, last season, in the last episode, one of the central figures, Fire Department Lieutenant Matt Casey, was pinned down in a burning building and appeared to have no way out. Now, this isn't your 1930s or 40s serial. There's no guarantee he's going to survive, unlike Hopalong Cassidy, who always did. It was indeed a real cliffhanger. The cliffhanger term basically means an unresolved situation at the end of a story. And the term comes from an 1873 serialized novel written by Thomas Hardy, a novel in which the protagonist is left literally hanging off a cliff. But even though the term cliffhanger only dates to 1873, it's a literary device that has been used for millennia, as our story from Jonah illustrates. I love this tiny little book of the Bible. It's just 4 short chapters. It's so full of really good material. I've even written a children's musical based on it called No, No, Nineveh. The story, as it appears in the Bible, is a beautifully crafted tale that many feel should be understood as a piece of literary fiction. Clearly, it was written at a time when people believed that God controlled every single little event in life, a belief many of us would not hold. But that doesn't diminish its value. This story still has much to tell us. While we are not sure when it was written, it's important to note that Nineveh was the real-life capital of Assyria, the much-hated empire that destroyed much of Israel. God calls Jonah to go to that ancient city. There, Jonah is to warn the Ninevites that God has it in for them, and he plans to bring their nation to ruin. But Jonah wants no part in it. Why give them advance warning, he says to himself. Just bring on the lightning bolts and earthquakes. Wipe them off the face of the planet. It's what those darn Ninevites deserve. So Jonah heads off in the opposite direction. He hops a ship bound for Tarshish, a little seaside town in Spain, complete with sangria and tapas. Clear on the other side of the Mediterranean, as far as one can go from Nineveh. But God is no fool. And God is clearly a he in the book of Jonah, he decides to teach the prophet a lesson. And so he sends a big Irma-sized storm. And Jonah is right smack dab in the middle of the cone of uncertainty. The ship gets all tossed about, and the sailors try to keep it afloat. They lower the sails, they toss out extra baggage, they change course, but all to no avail. Finally, being good, pious pagans, they assume some god or another is responsible for their fate. One of them shouts, "We should pray!" Another says, "It can't hurt!" And so down on the knees they go. But the waves just get bigger. The winds get stronger. A category 4 turns into a 5. Then the sailors remember there's one person who's not praying, Jonah. He's down in the hull. He got seasick earlier and went down there to rest. So they haul him up on deck, and he fairly quickly confesses, "I'm to blame. It must be my God who's responsible for the storm. And the only way to stop it is if you throw me overboard." The sailors are really, despite being pagans, really good guys. And they really don't want to toss him over the rails. But the storm gets even worse. And soon they are convinced, and they heave old Jonah into the raging surf. Almost instantly, the wind stops, and the waves calm down, and the ship is saved. But Jonah is long out of sight. No life preserver is going to bring him back. But God's not done with Jonah. And he sends a big fish. Listen, not a whale. The text never says a whale, not in Hebrew, not in English. It's Pinocchio who gets swallowed by the whale, not Jonah. Jonah's a fish. So the fish swallows him whole, and he's saved. 3 days and 3 nights he's in that fish belly. The odor is something else, almost does him in. Have you ever been inside a fish? Phew! But still he finds time to write a lovely little song, a psalm, if you will, proclaiming his gratitude for having been rescued from a sure death in the depths of Davy Jones' locker. The fish, no doubt feeling a little bit of indigestion, having a prophet in his belly after all, throws up. That's what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew says the fish vomits. And up comes Jonah. It's not a pretty sight. But at least Jonah ends up on solid ground. And this time he does what God commands him to do. He goes to Nineveh. He's sure it's a waste of his time. Those Ninevites are so evil, so awful. He's sure they won't listen, not to a word. They won't believe anything he's saying, but still he says it. 40 days, Ninevites, that's all you've got. 40 days, and then God's going to lay you out flat. And under his breath he mutters, good riddance. But then comes the big twist in the story. The Ninevites really hear him. And more than that, they believe him. In fact, they're scared to death. And suddenly they see the error of their ways. They put on some sackcloth, a scratchy old material that's a symbol of repentance. And they cover their heads with ashes. It makes a mess all over the place. Even a dustbuster can't get it. But if it convinces the deity that we really mean it when we say we're sorry, it's worth it. And it does convince the deity. God changes his mind and calls off the destruction of Nineveh. Now, you need to understand, Jonah had some real expectations here. He fully expected God to wipe out the Ninevites. But no, God had other ideas. And so Jonah gets really torqued, really mad. And he lets God know. You had me come all the way to this God-forsaken place, and for what? I just knew you'd go soft on me. You always do. That's why I went to Spain. I am so embarrassed. I mean, really, I told practically everybody I knew that you were going to destroy Nineveh, and you changed your mind. You let them off the hook. I could just die from embarrassment. And then he goes to the edge of the city to sulk, filled with anger and shame and resentment. But God's going to give Jonah one more shot. The Lord causes a bush, a gourd plant, a shrub, to grow right up beside Jonah. One with really big leaves that provide a real measure of shade for the prophet. And Jonah is very pleased with it. But then God has a worm come and attack the plant, and it tumbles over and it turns into, what's the city call it? Vegetative debris. And then God causes the sun to really turn on the burn. Think Sanibel in August. And Jonah is miserable. He almost faints. That's a bridge too far, God. Why did you kill that plant? Why don't you just kill me on the spot? Jonah, Jonah, Jonah. You are all worked up about a little bush, a shrub. You didn't plant it. You didn't cause it to grow. It was here one minute and gone the next. but you're upset about its fate. So what about me, Jonah? I mean, I'm the creator of the whole universe. I mean, the whole enchilada, Jonah. The stars, the planets, the fish, the mosquitoes, the people. Don't you think I should be concerned about a big city like Nineveh? Sure, they're a bit thick-headed, I'll grant you that. I mean, they don't know their left hand, their right hand from their left. But Jonah, there are 120,000 of them, grandpas and grandmas, moms and dads and little kids too. Shouldn't I care about them? And what about their animals? You know, their dogs and sheep and goldfish. At a shelter in Puerto Rico, a worker was showing a reporter how things were set up during Hurricane Maria. Look, he said, there are even a few dogs here. Dogs are part of the family too, and no one wants to have their family out in the rain. That's how I feel, Jonah. I love them all, even the cows, Jonah. Even the cows. Shouldn't I care? And that's it. The whole story ends with a question. You'd think the writer was from New England. We don't know what happens next. We don't know if Jonah shapes up. We don't know if the redeemed Ninevites go on to do good things and to respect God. We don't know what happens to all those pagan sailors. We just don't know. It's a real cliffhanger. What we do know, however, is this. What should have been a lovely ending with Jonah joining in the street celebrations in Nineveh turns into a rather bitter tale. It leaves a sour taste in your mouth, and all because of resentment. So how often have you allowed resentment to sour your life? How often have you had expectations that were not met and that turned you bitter? Expectations, after all, are just resentments waiting to happen. Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs suggest that most of life's problems grow out of resentments. And they also offer a way to deal with them, well paraphrased by the folks at Hazelden, a major publisher of recovery resources. Here's what they suggest. First, begin by writing down your resentments. Seeing them in black and white can help bring them down to size. Then, two, look at whatever role you may have played in the resentment. How did you contribute to the problem? Were you expecting too much? Were you expecting too little? Did your actions lead to the troubling incident that has left you feeling resentful? Third, develop a sense of willingness to let go of the resentment. Sometimes we gain great satisfaction by nursing our hurts and our resentments. How often have you told person after person after person just how ticked off you are with just keeping it broiling inside of you? Develop a willingness to let that go, because it doesn't bring you any closer to resolving the problem. Finally, pray for the person or persons whom you resent. It is amazing how much harder it is to resent someone if you are praying for them by name on a regular basis. You don't have to live life like Jonah, sunburned and full of anger. You don't have to sit under the withered debris of resentment. You can move past those things that hold you back and hold you down, all because you can be a channel for God's love, a love that is greater than the greatest of resentments, a love that includes Ninevites and Jonah and pagan sailors, a love that includes Russians and Koreans, north or south, a love that includes you and me and even the cows. Even the cows. And that's no cliffhanger. In fact, that's the most satisfying